Alright, welcome back to the channel. Let's go ahead and talk about Bitcoin along with some TradFi to see where we're at in the market today, as we did just have the FOMC meeting. The Fed did cut by 25 basis points, which was to be expected. Nothing too surprising there with the data or what he said. Essentially, Jerome Powell thinks the economy is very strong at the moment, but we do also have a lot of data that suggests he is wrong in saying that, and that we are actually headed into a recession. So we do have to stay very, very cautious out there, especially now with Bitcoin breaking into the all-time highs, grabbing this liquidity that was already pre-programmed on the chart. Now we need buyers to step in if we are going to continue up on higher, which I do think is going to happen, at least here in the short term. I think a lot of retail is going to be jumping back into the market, especially outside of Bitcoin and your riskier assets, such as the altcoin market and the Russell that we'll talk about today. I think you're going to see an explosion in there and some very exciting times ahead. But with that being said, as you start to feel euphoric and see everybody jumping back into the market, you see Coinbase going up on the App Store, as we already are seeing. We need to realize the top indicators. We just had a whiff get listed on Robinhood EU, not necessarily the Robinhood globally, I don't believe, at least. But certainly I can say at this point, I am starting to see some of my top indicators start to go off. Not selling anything at this point, though. I'm not really concerned about it, especially because some of the assets that I hold are things that I think are going to run at the last second before lights are out. I'm in a lot of meme coins. Meme coins are probably going to run, at least the smaller cap ones, at the very end. Those ones that I believe are very undervalued likely make their all-time high actually after Bitcoin has made a lower high on the chart, as we did see last cycle, right? We had talked about this previously. Ignoring this section within here, we had a Bitcoin make a lower high, and this is actually where Doge made its all-time high. That's when Elon went on SNL with Dogecoin, etc., and that's where you actually saw a lot of your meme coin euphoria, was after Bitcoin had already tanked and made that second maneuver upwards. And I do think we are potentially at this point in the market. So I'm not saying that to scare anyone. I don't know if that's necessarily likely. I've presented the case in which Bitcoin gets priced in as a reserve asset and we march up to multiple six figures. We could go to even $500,000 within the next year or so. That is not out of the equation. But something else that is not out of the equation is we go ahead and start to hunt down, make a lower high, and then roll over into the bear market. But even in this scenario, during this distribution phase, you would go ahead and see a lot of your risk on assets start to make higher highs, and this distribution might not look like this. It might look more or less like this, right, where you make a higher high, bit of a bear div on the weekly time frame. Let's talk about the weekly time frame bear div. Jump out here to the weekly on Bitcoin. Go ahead, turn on this RSI. We do have a very strong bearish divergence here on the weekly, but we got a lot of room to play with, right? Bitcoin could go ahead and march up to $100,000. It would still be holding that bearish div, but it would be sitting at $100,000. So I don't think there's any point to worry right now. This is not signaling that this RSI is going to roll over. RSI actually looks very strong here momentum wise on the shorter term time frames, but you can see we are starting to see these bearish trends on the strength of Bitcoin at the moment, right? We got the lower highs here throughout this phase of the market, and the big question is, what was this phase of the market? Is this Wyckoff accumulation and then breakout backtest go, or is this Wyckoff distribution upthrust breakdown backtest go, right? We don't know yet, and I think structurally we have to consider this could be distribution until we see otherwise. Now this also could be accumulation until we see otherwise. Right now there's not enough data to say one way or another what Bitcoin is going to do, and that's why I've been saying to be very, very patient on the chart. Do you have to wait for a full breakdown to go ahead and get bearish and then sell the backtest? Potentially that might be something that I would look to do. I'd wait for a full breakdown and then go ahead and wait for the retracement back up. Maybe we don't get that breakdown, but we start to show a lot of weakness within here, and then we start to distribute a little bit and it looks a bit top heavy. You could go ahead and try to time a top on some sort of maneuver like this. But right now I don't see any reason to get bearish, because we might simply skyrocket, or we might simply do a quick flush, as I do expect potentially happen, especially with FOMC today. Historically, at least recently, when we've had these FOMC meetings, they have been fairly non-eventful during the meeting, right? Some quick liquidity swings or whatnot. But then afterwards, the next following day, we have seen Bitcoin roll back substantially, and they have either marked tops or small correctionary phases before we go ahead and head on up. So I would say what is very likely right now is at least a back test of the $70,000 region to flush out all of this open interest that was pushed into the market right before that breakout of all-time highs. But that being said, on a fractal basis, if we're going to compare it to previous cycles, if we are in somewhat of a Wyckoff accumulation phase and we are breaking out right now truly of these all-time highs, it might play out very similar to November of 2020, right? The time frame lines up perfectly, and I would not be surprised either to see this happen and we just teleport to 6 figures plus. And that's another reason I would say we just got to be patient. We don't know what's going to happen here. Order flow is not suggesting that we need to pull back. There's not that many longs in the market that need to get flushed. This vector here on the daily time frame, it does not need to get retraced back into because it is a range breaking vector. And I'm actually very 50-50 right now on if Bitcoin is going to absolutely teleport or if it is going to start a distribution. But overall, I would say I'm definitely more on the bullish side of things, especially when we talk about more of your risk on assets, altcoin market, etc., as retail should be piling back into the market, but they're slowly coming in. I'm not seeing anything too crazy, any news headlines that are really flashing warning signs to me. It just feels like the majority of your general public are not talking about crypto right now. They're not in the space. So that gives me a little bit of comfort. I still think we got plenty of time left to see a lot of our assets start to skyrocket. My base case has been shifting back time frame wise, and I would say at this point I'm looking at the beginning of 2025, but very early 2025. I know a lot of people think the 4-year cycle is going to play out and the top's not going to come in until late 2025. I would just caution that. Let's jump out of Bitcoin though and go straight to some of our traditional finance, such as the S&P 500. As we are continuing to march up into all-time highs, this is another confluence to say we should not be worrying about the price of Bitcoin right now, because historically Bitcoin tops out when the S&P is in distribution. The S&P is still going parabolic, so this money still needs to get rotated around into riskier assets, which probably happens later on, and this could suggest to us that Bitcoin is going to in fact continue to skyrocket up into 6 figures plus, and maybe it gets priced in as a reserve asset. So this is something really awesome to see, but very similar to Bitcoin here. We just need to be patient with the S&P, see how these next few weeks do react with price action, as this is just not enough to tell us, is this just a short squeeze up thrust before rolling back within the range and rejecting, because that would be pretty bearish, or is this going to have a nice continuation and lots of buyers stepping in to push it up? I will say though, even if this were to pull back, I don't think the run's going to be over for traditional finance, as the Russell is banging its head right up against the all-time highs, and I'm very confident we are going to see price discovery on the Russell. Price discovery on the Russell will give you that nice confluence with the altcoin market, and I do think we're going to see all assets across the board and all markets start to fly as the Russell starts to close in here on price discovery, and the breakout of this could easily lead to another full-on super cycle in crypto and especially the altcoin market. But as with our other charts, we'll make sure to watch this like a hawk, see if we are getting some sort of distribution and break back within, or if this is going to be a nice bullish breakout and continuation up with those nice strong buyers. It all depends on money flow overall. Where is that money going to come from? Banks, institutions, retail investors, what has already been put into the market, what still needs to be put into the market, and when is the time for large sellers to start distributing. And while I think we could be nearing the point where we do see the flip of institutional buying into selling and sidelined retail jumping back into the market, I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think ramping up to that moment in the market is where things get super, super exciting, and we're going to see a lot of big gains and euphoria return back to the market. So yeah, essentially don't be surprised to see some pretty big red candles here on the shorter term time frame, as we did just have FOMC, and recently those have been pretty bearish, at least after the meetings. We got a lot of signs on the chart that say we could dip back and sweep some of these lows all the way down to around, and there is that small chance that the top is in for Bitcoin. We could be seeing it right now. Bitcoin never goes above $77,000, but overall, with everything put together on the charts, I just cannot get bearish. But of course, if you have any questions about anything I talked about or just want to join the community for this channel, Link to my Discord is in the description down below. Also down below are links to my exchange partners, so make sure to go use those referrals if you want to get yourself some nice bonuses and rewards. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.